Amelia Earhart mystery finally solved, and it's heartbreaking. The $11 million search for Amelia Earhart just crushed millions of hearts worldwide. Picture this, January 2024. Headlines explode across the world like atomic bombs. Amelia Earhart's plane found after 8 people cry with joy in living rooms across America. Families who waited nearly a century finally taste hope. The greatest mystery in aviation history appears solved in a single moment. But hold on, there's something they didn't tell you, something that will shatter everything you think you know about this discovery. By the time this video ends, you'll understand why this breakthrough became the cruelest hoax in aviation history. Amelia Earhart wasn't born to be a legend. She was born to be forgotten, like millions of other women in 1897 America. Her father was an alcoholic lawyer who couldn't keep a job. They moved constantly, running from debts and shame. When she was 7 years old, she built a homemade roller coaster in her backyard and rode it down a steep hill. She crashed spectacularly, tearing her dress and blooding her lip. But Amelia smiled through the blood and said the most prophetic words of her life, "Oh, it was just like flying." That moment set the course for everything that followed. The world Amelia entered as a young woman was suffocating for someone with her spirit. Women couldn't vote until she was 23. Flying was not just a man's profession, it was a man's obsession. But Amelia had tasted freedom on that homemade roller coaster. In 1920, she paid $10 for a 10-minute ride in a biplane. The moment they lifted off the ground, she knew her life had changed forever. As soon as we left the ground, she wrote later, "I knew I myself had to fly, but flying lessons cost money she didn't have. Society offered nothing but discouragement." Here's what they don't teach you in history books. Amelia's first flight instructor was a woman named Netta Snook, one of only a handful of female pilots in the world. Netta carried scars that told the true story of women in aviation. She had been sabotaged by male pilots who cut her fuel lines. She had crashed twice due to mysterious mechanical failures. Netta looked at young Amelia and warned, "Flying will give you everything, but it will also take everything away." Those words would prove more prophetic than either woman could imagine. The breakthrough came in 1928, but it came with a price that nearly destroyed. A wealthy publisher named George Putnam planned a publicity stunt. The first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. But here's the secret they never told the public. Amelia wouldn't actually fly the plane. She would sit in the passenger seat while 2 male pilots did the real work. She would be nothing more than cargo with a pretty face. Amelia knew this, she hated it. But she understood that sometimes you have to accept a compromise to position yourself for the real victory. The flight succeeded, but newspapers called her Lady Lindy, reducing her to someone else's shadow. Amelia felt the shame like acid in her stomach. "I was just baggage," she admitted to friends, "but next time, I'll be the pilot." 4 years later, she proved it. On May 20, 1932, Amelia Earhart took off from Newfoundland alone in a single-engine Lockheed Vega. She was terrified and determined to either make history or die trying. Mechanical problems forced her to land in Northern Ireland instead of Paris. When Irish farmers found her, they asked if she had come far. "From America," she replied. The world went insane. She became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. But fame came with invisible chains that grew heavier every day. Behind the public smiles, Amelia was planning something that would either secure her place in history forever, or kill her. She wanted to fly around the world at the equator, covering nearly 29,000 miles. The technical challenges were staggering. But the real challenge was financial. George Putnam, now her husband, saw the world flight as the ultimate publicity stunt. He organized the funding and managed every detail, but Putnam's involvement came with a price Amelia only understood too late. He controlled her story, her image, her very identity. "I'm not a person anymore," she confided to her sister, "I'm a brand." The expedition began on May. Amelia took off from Oakland, California in a twin-engine Lockheed Electra, accompanied by navigator Fred Noonan. Here's what they never told you. Fred Noonan, despite being one of the world's best navigators, was battling alcoholism that he had hidden from everyone. The stress of the expedition was pushing him toward a relapse that could doom them both. On June 29, 1937, they reached New Guinea, exhausted and behind schedule. The most dangerous the next leg would take them to tiny Howland Island, a speck barely 2 miles long in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Missing Howland meant certain death. On July 2, 1937, at 10:22 a.m., Amelia and Fred took off for what would become their final flight. The plane struggled into the air, heavy with fuel and fighting unexpected headwinds. For the first few hours, everything seemed normal. But as they approached the halfway point to Howland Island, something began to go wrong. Weather was worse than expected. Headwinds were eating their fumes. Navigation became difficult in cloudy skies. At 7:42 a.m., Amelia transmitted her most haunting message. "We are running north and south." She was lost, running low on fuel, searching desperately for an island she couldn't find. At 8:43 a.m., her final transmission crackled through static. "We are on the line 57-337, running on north and south." Then silence, forever. The search that followed was massive. The U.S. Navy spent $4 million in 1937 dollars, equivalent to $80 million today. They found nothing. For 87 years, people have searched with an obsession that borders on madness. Families have spent fortunes. Researchers have dedicated careers. The theories multiply. Maybe she crashed in the ocean, maybe she reached a desert island, maybe Japanese soldiers captured her. Each theory has passionate believers, but none has definitive proof. This brings us to Tony Romeo, a man whose obsession would ultimately break millions of hearts, including his own. Tony wasn't a treasure hunter. He was a successful real estate developer from South Carolina, who had built a comfortable life. But Tony was haunted by the Amelia Earhart mystery in a way that consumed his thoughts. He read every book, studied every theory. His family worried about his fixation. In 2022, Tony made a decision that shocked everyone. He sold his real estate company for $11 million, and announced he would spend every penny searching for Amelia Earhart. His family thought he had lost his mind, but Tony had reached a point where money meant less than answers. Tony founded Deep-Sea Vision, and invested in sonar technology, so advanced it could spot dinner plate-sized objects on the ocean floor, miles below the surface. In September 2023, his expedition set sail with equipment worth millions and hopes building for nearly a century. For 100 days, they searched methodically, scanning ocean floor deeper than Mount Everest is tall. Most days brought nothing but disappointment. The team grew discouraged. Money hemorrhaged from the budget. Tony began to wonder if he had made the most expensive mistake in treasure hunting history. Then on day 87, something appeared on the sonar display that made everyone's breath catch. The object was 16,000 feet below the surface, roughly 100 miles from Howland Island. The shape was unmistakable. It looked exactly like a twin-engine aircraft, with wings, fuselage, and landing gear. The dimensions matched Amelia's Lockheed Electra perfectly. Tony stared at the sonar image with trembling hands and tears in his eyes. After 87 years, someone had finally found Amelia Earhart. The announcement in January 2024 triggered a global media frenzy. Major networks cleared programming schedules. Newspapers printed special editions. Social media platforms crashed from traffic. Aviation experts studied the sonar image, and declared it consistent with Amelia's plane. Historians called it the discovery of the century. Overnight, Tony Romeo became one of the most famous people on Earth. But fame brought pressure he hadn't anticipated. Everyone wanted proof beyond the sonar image. Skeptics demanded additional evidence. Tony knew they were right. Sonar images could lie. He needed cameras for definitive proof. The return expedition in November 2024 carried the hopes of millions who had followed the story for months. Tony's team deployed high-definition cameras, capable of capturing crystal-clear images in the crushing darkness. The cameras descended slowly through hostile water. Powerful lights pierced the eternal night as cameras approached the object that had made Tony famous. The team watched their monitors with surgical intensity. What they saw destroyed not just their dreams, but the dreams of everyone who had dared to hope. The object was not an airplane, it was a natural rock formation, sculpted by millions of years of underwater currents into a shape that coincidentally resembled a twin-engine aircraft. The wings were ledges of stone, the fuselage was a ridge of sediment. The landing gear was shadows, and wishful thinking. Tony stared at the images and felt his world collapse. The discovery that had made him famous was revealed as nature's cruelest hoax, a geological coincidence that had fooled sophisticated technology. Tony faced a choice that would define his character forever. He could hide the truth and maintain his status as the man who found Amelia Earhart. Or he could tell the world the devastating truth and face the consequences. Tony chose honesty over reputation. In a painful press conference, he announced that the object was not Amelia's plane but a natural rock formation. The backlash was swift and merciless. People who had celebrated felt betrayed. Families who had found closure were plunged back into uncertainty. The cruelest part of Tony Romeo's story isn't that he was wrong. The cruelest part is what his mistake revealed about human hope. When Tony released his sonar image, millions of people experienced genuine joy, not because they loved underwater exploration, but because they loved Amelia Earhart and everything she represented. They wanted her story to have an ending. When the truth emerged, those same people felt something more devastating than disappointment. They felt betrayed by the universe itself. The pattern of broken dreams around Amelia Earhart extends far beyond Tony's expedition. Every few years, someone claims to have found her. In 1991, researchers discovered aircraft debris on an island, and spent years insisting it belonged to Amelia, only to prove it came from a different aircraft. In 2012, bone fragments were declared to be Amelia's remains until DNA testing proved otherwise. In 2017, a photograph allegedly showing Amelia as a Japanese prisoner created headlines, until experts proved the photo predated her flight. Each discovery follows the same heartbreaking cycle: excitement, attention, analysis, disappointment. This pattern reveals something profound about human nature. We need answers, we crave closure, we cannot accept that some questions might be permanently unanswerable. The mystery of Amelia Earhart has become a cultural obsession, a puzzle that society feels compelled to solve regardless of cost. Each failed discovery makes the next claim harder to believe, creating a dangerous cycle where legitimate findings might be dismissed as more false hope. But perhaps the most tragic aspect is what it reveals about our inability to accept that some stories don't have endings. Amelia Earhart disappeared in 1937, and despite 87 years of searching, we are no closer to knowing what happened than we were the day she vanished. Every piece of alleged evidence has been debunked, every promising lead has gone cold. Yet people continue to search, continue to hope, continue to believe that the next expedition will solve the mystery. This persistence is simultaneously beautiful and heartbreaking. It's beautiful because it demonstrates humanity's refusal to give up. It's heartbreaking because it suggests we cannot accept the limits of human knowledge, cannot make peace with uncertainty, cannot find closure without concrete answers. Tony Romeo's story is ultimately a mirror reflecting our own relationship with hope and impossible dreams. He spent $11 million chasing a ghost, and when he thought he caught it, it turned out to be rocks shaped by chance. But perhaps that money wasn't wasted. Perhaps the real value wasn't in finding Amelia, but in proving she still matters enough for someone to risk everything looking for her. In the end, the search for Amelia Earhart tells us more about ourselves than about her fate. It reveals our hunger for heroes, our need for stories that inspire us to dream beyond safety's boundaries. Amelia Earhart has been missing for 87 years,
but she has never been more alive in our collective consciousness. Every failed search proves her enduring power. Every broken heart demonstrates her lasting impact. Tony Romeo didn't find Amelia Earhart's plane, but he found something else. Proof that 87 years after her disappearance, people still care enough to risk everything looking for her. In a world that often feels cynical, that might be the most beautiful discovery of all. The mystery of Amelia Earhart will outlive all of us. New expeditions will launch, new technologies will be deployed, and somewhere, in the vast Pacific Ocean or in humanity's collective imagination, Amelia Earhart will continue to inspire people to dream impossible dreams, to push beyond safe boundaries, and to never stop searching for answers even when questions might be unanswerable. That, perhaps, is exactly what she would have wanted, to keep flying forever, always just beyond our reach, always calling us to follow her into the unknown.